All right, very good. Sorry about the delay, everyone. Just had a lot I had to do. And wanted to make sure that we get this good lecture into you today, since it's one of the last ones that I'll have for you. Public policy. We started this lecture on Monday. And as we went over it, public policy is everything. And like I finished it up, public policy can either make you free or make you into a slave. And I'm trying to get this right, and it's not getting right. All right, there we go. This is where we stop. Now, to continue on, public policy is just government's way of controlling the behavior of society, or I should say, seriously influencing society. Because public policy is the only true tool other than military force that government can use to make changes in society. Now, like the screen says, everything that is done is public policy, from the products that are used, how you travel, how you pay for education, the relationships in your life, the food and drink that you consume. Public policy determines who can use a restroom. Public policy can determine who is considered to be free, and public policy can also decide who votes. One moment. See what's going on here. Got some of your brethren that didn't know what's going on here. All right. So when public policy is made, it comes from an idea. It is like one of the questions I asked on Monday to one of the gentlemen in our class. I asked him, what kind of changes would you like to make in your community? And he said, let's stop police brutality. And I went through the process of how public policy to stop police brutality can get done. If you want to solve police brutality, public policy is the only way it can do it, and it's public policy on the local and state level that can get it done more immediately. If you go through the federal government, public policy can only shape or change police brutality on the federal level because of federalism. But if it changes on the state level, it has to ask states permission to make changes to how they police. And they do this by providing money. Think about that. Money. The public policy of giving Black people rights, civil rights, all people civil rights, from the 1964 Civil Rights Act, wasn't out of the kindness of the heart of states to instantly flip to give civil rights to Blacks and other minorities, but because of federal funding or the threat of losing federal funding. So in order to get the world or the country to change its policy on how it looks at others, it had to have influence. So Now, when public policies are researched, we looked at the different models of it. We looked at public policy from the institutional model, from the elite model, from the pluralistic model, the group or the sub-government model, the rational or comprehensive model, and the public choice model. The institutional model is based upon how institutions like Congress or like state government or like city governments implement public policy. The elite model is how social elites affect it through their influence. Pluralistic model is just simply how elites and other groups, interest groups, influence public policy. Group or sub-government model shows how different areas are studied. The rational comprehensive model is based upon an analysis of all information provided to determine the correct public policy. You may understand under the rational comprehensive model, you may find something called critical race theory. Critical race theory is part of a rational comprehensive model because critical race theory reviews different laws and policies to see how it has affected race over a specific period of time or gender. And once that information is gained, we have an excellent idea of how laws or how public policy has shaped the racial dynamic of the United States as a whole, within a state, within a city. The public choice model, based upon those involved in public policy making to find solutions that fit. This is my model because my expertise is in public policy. And what I do is I try to find policy that would best help society overall, or just best help. So is this everyone? No one can hear me? Am I the only one that, or is he the only one that can hear me? Can y'all hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so it's that one person. Mr. Jasper, you may have to change things around a little bit. Thank you. So say when I say the problems with the Black community, I try to find solutions, and part of my dissertation right now is looking at different solutions. One of the major things I've seen in the Black community that harms us the most is we usually live in food deserts. We usually do not have banks to spur economic growth. And we usually do not have any avenues of political participation. But as many of you know, we have convenience stores, liquor stores, nightclubs. Those are legit businesses, and there's nothing wrong with that. But how do those clubs contribute to the overall community to make it economically prosperous? And it doesn't. To be quite honest, those type of institutions or those type of businesses have so low margin, only the people who actually run them can actually squeeze a profit out of them. It doesn't provide loans for homes, doesn't provide food for families. It doesn't show any form of political cohesiveness. And then, as a matter of fact, many of you may have noticed that a lot of those stores or a lot of those businesses in predominantly Black neighborhoods are run by others who either just recently immigrated to the United States or who also are considered minorities that are on the same realm as Black people. So me as a public policy person on the public choice model, I would come up and I would introduce policy or potential policy that would spur economic growth. And when you spur economic growth, you tend to participate more politically because you want to keep the economic growth and success, and you tend to expand and you tend to gain more power. That's public policy if it's used. Any questions about that? Okay. Now, once we have figured out a policy, we go through what is called policy analysis. It's how we investigate how public policies are thought up, implemented, and then reevaluated. Here's the stages of public policy. So remember, we started out on Monday. Public policy comes from an idea. Let's flip this a little bit. George Floyd situation. I know I'm coming back to that a lot, but that's not a good situation, but it's a very good example too. We all saw that. The press hyped that up. Now, we're at the stage now, all of you, that everything that you have learned up to this point, you should be combining it now. So the press hypes this up, frames this issue, let everyone knows about this issue, and makes it into something that government should pay attention to. The demonstrations are a symptom of an overall problem that is going on, and it's letting the world know. The press and the people are basically working together here, even though independently. Government officials are recognizing this problem, and they realize that since the press is on it, you have people in the streets demonstrating it. If I want to keep my job as a public official, we need to do something about it. Well, you may ask the question, okay, I see people doing something about it, but I don't see others doing about it. Well, from the Democratic point of view, talking about the Democratic Party, something had to be done because we do not want to lose our base of support from Blacks, from young people, and for people who lean a little bit more right. I mean left of center. So we take it to the point of view of what Congress is in. Congress is now dominated by the Democratic Party. So they recognize that a problem, it's worthy of government consideration. And what they do is, okay, we're going to do something about it. They formulate a policy to do something about it. We will give money for diversity training, anger management training, more psychological evaluation, and training of when to use weapons during any police stop. And what we do is we try to find as many approaches as possible to put that into law. Once it passes the House and the Senate, and the president signs it, that means we have adopted the policy. Cool. So we formally selected the policy we're going to do. Remember, we're now down to chapter 7 and 8. We're under the executive branch now, where we've adopted the policy. We're interpreting this policy and giving it to the proper branch to actually implement this policy. The distance between policy adoption and policy implementation is 18 months right here. The difference between number 1 and number 2, all the way number 3, can be as little as a week or as long as 2 years. All right, so the president goes ahead, signs it into law, has the law from Congress, interprets the law their way, gives it to the proper agency, the Justice Department, and they interpret this law their way. They create all the internal mechanisms that are needed in order to implement the law, and then they actually implement it. Now, when the implementation occurs, it will change the federal system within the next year. But if we apply it to the states, it's up to the states to accept it. After 5 to 7 years after the law has been implemented, we evaluate that policy to see if it worked. And we look at the things that did work, and we look at the things that didn't work. And then we try to restart this process again to fix those things that didn't work. And it has to go through the same loop again. But here's the issue. What if the Republicans are in charge of Congress, which may happen next week? They may implement that law, yes. They may make those changes, yes, but in a different way, in a way that some of you may like and some of you may not like. And it goes through the same process again. And still at the second to the last part of implementation, remember, before it affects the states have to agree to accept it, either the money or to voluntarily just pass the law themselves on their level. So to stop future incidents like the George Floyd incident from action on the streets, from news media to actually becoming law, we can see a period as little as 6 months to as long as 4 years. And then it will take another 5 to 7 years to evaluate it, to see if it works. So by this time, we have had almost 11 years in total to see if it would happen, see if anything changed. And that's what takes so long. Any questions about this process? Okay. All right, the context of public policy, the meaning. Now, we talked about the different processes. We're going to go through the institutional context right quick. Remember, it's the view of public policy from institutions within the federal, state, and local government. Laws are created by Congress under the president. Laws are created by Congress, but the president and the agency interprets it based on its ideology. Then they make rules based on that interpretation. And then when an institution actually implements that law or that policy, people down at the lower level have discretion enough to interpret their way. A lot of this is not even constitutional. But because people at the lower level has room to interpret it, it may be something that you don't care to even know about. Intergovernment relations is the interaction between federal, state, and local agencies to apply policy to individuals. Now, remember, federalism is the constitution of sharing power. Remember, if you want to change everything on the state level, you have to do it on the state level. You cannot rely on the federal government to do it. If the federal government has a public policy to stop police brutality, it can stop it instantly on their level when they pass the law and implement it, but they have to ask states or give them money to persuade them to do it. Intergovernmental relations in public policy is basically state and federal government, or state and local government, or federal and local government working with each other to basically receive funding to make changes due to policy. Most states, when the federal government wants to give money to a community to stop something like police brutality, must get approval from states first, so that the city itself can use that. And many states reject it. Other states, their constitutions will allow their cities to accept federal funding at any way they want to. So it just depends on the state, and it depends on how the states look at the policy, if they want to approve it or not. That's intergovernmental relations. Remember, the federal government influences policies onto state and local governments by providing funding grants. State governments can accept or refuse grants based upon federal requirements, or depending on the state and local governments, can accept funding without state permission. It depends on the state. The economic context. Federal, state, and local government create policy to influence the economy. The federal government will provide grants to improve the economy of a state and local government. State and local governments will use federal grants for projects and services to assist with improving the economy, and individuals will receive the benefits of economic grants by the expansion of jobs and public services. Let's look at this from this point of view, the economic context. Right now, everybody is all pissed off about inflation. All Biden can't get inflation under control. Oh, everything is so hot. Congress is screwing us over. They need to get inflation under control. You want to know something? That's a pipe dream. Inflation is caused by how markets are reacting to different supply and demand factors throughout the economy. Yes, you can influence it by restricting or by lessening the money supply, but you can't change different supply chains. You can't change the cost of gasoline by introducing several million barrels into the system, because there are billions of barrels of gasoline that are being made and controlled by other countries. The best way that the federal government can help the economic context is to provide money, funding grants to state and local governments, so state and local governments can go out and build things, which seeps down into everyone else. That's the only way they can do things like this. And right now, one of the things we have seen, yes, inflation is high, but guess what? Unemployment is low, and people are still switching jobs, being able to pick and choose jobs at a very high rate. It's basically an employee's market out there right now. Also, salaries until recently have been stagnant. Now salaries are going up. It's not going up as fast as the rate of inflation, but they're still going up. I predict that inflation will start going down because a lot of the supply chain issues have been resolved. So you should start seeing inflation going down. Salaries are going up. And I guarantee you this will happen. If the Republicans win in November, next week, they will take credit for it, even though everyone knows in the political science or economic science departments, they've already seen the changes happening. If the Democrats win, they'll take full credit of it too. And nothing that any of them have done actually did any good. The demographic context of public policy. Basically, government policy is directed to benefit a specific demographic of society. But there are always unintended consequences. So let's look at this point. Look at the demographics, not necessarily from the point of view of race, but from the point of view of socioeconomic status. You've always heard that, well, we're going to help out the middle class. We're going to lower taxes on the middle class. We're going to do this and do that for the middle class. And you may ask yourself this question, why do they always want to help the middle class? Because the largest cross section or the largest demographic in the United States is the middle class, by far the largest group. The second largest group are the working class and poor. And of course, number three are the wealthy. So if you get tax breaks for houses, tax breaks for expenses, you get tax break for anything, there will be more money into the system, economic-wise, and that group will benefit. But some of the unintended consequences of cutting taxes for the middle class and wealthy is that services that provide a safety net or actually help those who are poor will make poor people suffer. But let's flip it around. Let's say government policy to help poor people or working class people that will provide them more benefit. The unintended consequences could be higher taxes for the middle class and for wealthy. And you may say, oh, that's good for them. Yeah, that's good for them until members who are working class or poor become middle class and wealthy, and they're like, I don't want the government in my pocket. That can also affect how the economy grows, and it could cause a slowdown. And it could wind up hurting the entire economy. So when you create policy to affect a specific demographic, either positively or negatively, the unintended consequences will always hurt another group. Let's take Jim Crow, for instance. Must always go back to that. Separate but equal. It's a demographic policy. Let's look at redlining, which was a policy that came out of Jim Crow. If you don't know what redlining is, even though I've mentioned it a few times, redlining was how certain districts were redlined off on a map to prevent them from receiving certain funding for housing subsistence, like what most people received in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, and 60s and 70s. You had the unintended consequence, the consequences of redlining is that you had one demographic, basically those who were the dominant group, gain a large amount of wealth over time, while suppressing the economic wealth of Blacks, Hispanics, Asians. If the overall unintended consequences actually hurt the United States, because you had a group of people out there that could have had an enormous amount of wealth, but because they weren't allowed to have it, you had an enormous amount of poverty in which you had to create services in order to provide a safety net for that group. And you wind up, if you wind up giving billions of dollars, which prevent other services or other capabilities from occurring, raising taxes on the people who created the amount of wealth that drove the economic engine, and you slowed overall growth of the United States economy. Now, if you'd have provided loans for homes for all groups during that time, you would have had trillions and trillions of dollars of wealth. You barely had to implement or fund social programs, and the United States economic engine would have been much bigger and more powerful. Because of discrimination, because of race and redlining, it actually retarded the growth of the United States economy. The United States, which is still the most dominant economy in the world, could have been 10 times bigger. The ideological context. When government policy is designed to favor a specific ideology point of view, there's positives and negatives. Conservatives want smaller government, economic markets to solve social problems, regulate social behavior, and stronger law enforcement. Liberals have government solve most problems, economic equality, reject regulation of social behavior, and increase protection of civil liberties. The best form of ideological context that I can give you is Roe v. Wade. The ideological context of the public policy to end Roe v. Wade pleased conservatives, but did not please liberals, because many liberals saw it as a violation of a woman's right to do whatever she wants with her body. Conservatives saw it as saving the life of unborn children. Now, that's the unintended consequences, that you basically eliminate abortion. But you look at it from the point of view of the state of Kansas and many states, ending Roe v. Wade may have satisfied conservatives for some point, but one of the things we do know, that 65 to 70% of most people believe that there should be some abortion rights and have put it on ballots. The ideological context of that public policy, when people go vote for it, will give women the right to an abortion. It will piss off conservatives, and it will show that conservatives, with all the 50 years of effort to stamp out abortion, was in vain, but it would make liberals happy because their efforts to maintain the right to abortion will continue. That's how an ideological context of a public policy works. The cultural context. Culture is the shared beliefs, traditions, religion, language, and customs that make up a specific group of people known as an ethnicity. Cultural contexts of public policies are policies that help to enhance or retard the culture of an ethnic group. Think about this. Laws in the United States mostly were designed to assist one cultural group, one ethnic group. For the majority of the history of the United States. Until recently, the culture context of public policy, and what I mean recently within the last 60 years, has been more designed to help all cultures. But there are some people that believe that public policy, which has been in their favor throughout the history of the United States, is now pretty much against them. And it ignores the overall culture, such as gay rights, the rights of LGBTQs. Many cultures in the United States do not support those rights. And they create policy to suppress or to prevent any new rights for that group. One of the best example is the trans law in the United States, or I mean, not in the United States, but in Oklahoma, that prevents anyone from using a restroom that does not fit with the birth of their sex. So if you were born a woman, you were to use a female bathroom. If you were born a male, you're only used to use the male bathroom, even though you may have totally transitioned from a male to a female or from a female to a male. Those are cultural aspects within public policy that is designed to support one culture and to suppress another. Questions or comments about what we just went over? Anyone? Understand, all of you, that public policy is the sum total of everything that we have just studied within the last 14 weeks. You must understand the Constitution, which is the bedrock of everything we do. Federalism is the two systems of government that we work with in this country. You have federal, you have state, and they're both sovereign unto themselves. Federalities can't intrude on the state, and the state sure as hell can't intrude on the federal government. Once we have that, we have civil liberties that protect us from government intrusion. That was only applied to the federal government until the 14th Amendment came into place. And selective incorporation through the courts over time have placed those protections into state constitutions. Civil rights are for specific individual groups, or as we would like to say, not protected groups, but classified groups. It started off as a negative and grew to more of a positive, depending on how law is done. But the civil rights in the United States are not permanent. They're only legislative law, federal law, that has been accepted by states, because of money from the federal government. And this is done by Congress, who has the ultimate power in our government, on the federal level, that is. Congress makes the laws, the president simply signs them into law or vetoes them. Congress can still override a president's veto. Once a law is passed, a president has a constitutional duty to enforce that law. But the president of the United States, once received a law, interprets a certain way and gives the different agencies under the president that interpretation, and those agencies interpret the president's interpretation, the actual law interpretation, in their ways, and they implement that law. That law is public policy. Any policy that the president wants Congress to adopt must have public support, because the president does not have power without public support. The judicial branch will interpret if the law is constitutional or not. All levels of the judiciary on the federal and state level are connected. They use statutory law or case precedents or case law to determine what law is considered constitutional or not. They have judicial review to review all cases. We tried to figure out people what their opinion of government is through public opinion, through polling. People get their public opinion during political socialization from their family, their friends, their schools, their churches or religion, just people who are around them. We take that political socialization and we use political parties. Political parties use that socialization to bring people together to gain power. People who know how to use political parties will use political parties for their own advantage. Members who are within political parties or who want to participate in government must run for office, and people must vote for them or support them financially so they can become elected. But the best way for the average human being in America to have power is to form interest groups. The best way for certain ethnic groups to gain power is to form interest groups which will focus on their issues, make sure their people are registered to vote, and keep government officials accountable to them. If you have ethnic groups that do not form these interest groups, you have ethnic groups that have no power. And the media takes all of this for their own purpose to make a profit and to hype it up. But they will call attention to social problems, and they will frame it in any way possible depending upon their audience. All of this comes together to create public policy in which the government uses this to influence how people behave through cultural, institutional, or demographic context. And when a policy is implemented, there are always unintended consequences that will hurt someone and benefit others. Any questions about any of this? Okay, this is what's going to happen. The final.
Wait, Dr. Felix, I have a question. So you know how midterm is going on right now for presidential stuff.
There's
And
no-
they and
what do
they're
you what do you mean midterm? You mean the final that's about to occur in 2 weeks?
no, I'm talking about presidential. Like they're doing midterm.
Oh, you mean, well, it's not presidential, dear. It's
Oh, it's
congressional.
not okay. I don't know. I don't know
It's
how
the-
to say it right.
It's all
but-
right. It's congressional midterms.
Okay.
It's the elections. Yeah, go ahead.
And so I was talking to Miss McGee about it, and she said, well, they're talking about, elderly not having Social Security.
hmm
And I wanted to know your thoughts about them trying to take away Social Security away from elderly when they've been working all their life and they want to take it away.
Okay. I think you should really look into this more. I mean, we hear other people, especially other groups, saying that one group is going to take away Social Security and one group is going to make it better. I will tell you this. Social Security has been around for almost 100 years now. And it's a bedrock within our governmental system. Now, there may be some cuts if, say, the Republicans get into it, but it won't be severe cuts for this main reason. One is that people who are on Social Security, unlike young people, they vote and they vote often. And if you affect their Social Security in any way, they will easily remove you from office. So one of the things that Democrats and both Republicans tend not to do is affect Social Security. So I will tell you there, I disagree with Ms. McGee to this point. Yes, Republicans tend to want to retailor Social Security so that it will be less taxing, but from the trend that has been happening for the last 10 to 15 years, that has basically stopped. So they're not, Social Security is not going to get cut at all because political parties, like I just told you, want to stay in power. And any political party that tries to cut Social Security will no longer be in power. So
Yeah, I
that
just
is the
wanted to
straight-
know your thoughts.
Yeah,
Thank
that's my thoughts on it. No one's going to cut Social Security. You have to look a little deeper below the surface.
Mhm.
Because what you're getting right now is you're getting a lot of bullshit from a lot of politicians, and a lot of people tend to latch on to the facade that politicians are giving you. What you have to do is look at the real issues and things that have been occurring for the last several years and the philosophy, and you can actually see a more clear picture. But no, they're not going to be cut. They're not going to cut Social Security. They're not even going to go and redesign it because Republicans or Democrats want to stay in power.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Ms. Washington. That's a good question.
Yeah,
That's a
I've been watching the news and stuff, see what's been going on and trying to, get more information about what's going on in the world. And I just saw today that they was talking about voting and voting for rights on Social Security. That's why I brought it up.
Right.
And I
Right.
said, and I told Miss McGee, I told her, I said, I think I disagree, but at the same time, you got to look from both parties, as you said. And I was thinking, okay, so if they did, that would be wrong and in the defense because we work all our life and then you try to take it.
Right.
And it doesn't make sense. So like I really disagree on, taking Social Security.
Right.
Why would you take Social Security and they're 70 years old? They can't provide they can't go out there and work. Some can, but some can't because they're disabled.
Right.
And so I was really thinking on how they would feel.
Mhm.
So I really had to get that question out to you because I know you would give me a valid answer.
Okay. Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, no party is going to be crazy enough to do that. If they do that, they're basically signing their death warrant with their American public if they do that. So, they wouldn't do that. Any other questions? Okay, guys, this is what's going to happen. By Monday, you should receive, those of you who are exempt from the final exam, by Monday, will receive an email from me letting you know that you're exempt. Okay? If you have not received that email from me by Monday, that means you need to be in class on Monday, so we can go over everything from the semester next week. Even though it's dead week next week, I'm going to try to give you somewhat a review of what's to come. But that's for only the non-exempt people. The exempt people, when you receive your email, you know you don't need to worry about it. You're going to be exempt from the final. Okay? But Friday, as normal, at 1 o'clock will be Q&A. If you have questions or concerns, if no one shows up within the first 15 minutes of that, then I will end it for the day. Okay? All right. And this is for the 1 p.m. class only. So everyone, God bless you. And thank you for being here today. I'm sorry about the fact that I had to do this on Zoom. Something came up, but you know what? Thank you for a wonderful semester for most of you. You guys are some of the best. And I want you to keep your passion with you. Take care. God bless you. And I'll see you later.